Hello everyone, this is going to be part 1 in my series of guides on how to build a standard account and how to draft standard. So we're starting off with cleave. If you want to skip this little explanation, I've got timestamps, right? Feel free to skip this, but I do recommend you hear me out. So, why cleave? Well, the reason is actually quite simple. If you want any chance to compete with any of these guys, which you will have to start fighting a lot of these top players, even as low as Mythic 2, you're going to need to be a turn 1 player. Because to compete with turn 2 at the highest level is incredibly expensive, right? You need so many lattices in so many characters, and most importantly, you need all of your bruisers P5, because 10% less damage taken and more damage dealt is very huge, right? All else equal, if you have the same gear, the same skill, the same everything, and you're just taking 10% more damage and dealing 10% less, you're going to lose much more often than you win against these guys. However, as a turn 1 player, CC, cleave, the investment is much lower, and you really don't need P5 on anybody. It helps to have a P5 Massiah, but it's not necessary. So that's why I'm starting off with cleave. So if you're going to build a standard account, I highly recommend starting out with turn 1, right? Cleave and or CC. I wouldn't so much recommend CC now that Etheria is in the game. You really want a strong cleave setup to pivot to whenever they're trying to go anti-CC. But for the most part, the lattice investment is really low, right? Heinrich only needs 114, right? That's 3 lattices to make him one of the strongest characters in the game. Mio can get away with 433. Nahor really only needs 424. Freya is fine at 511. The only characters you need to really heavily invest in are your damage dealers. Most of them will only have one skill that you don't need to max level, right? So they're going to need 11 lattices each. But aside from that, it's pretty cheap. And so what you'll want to do is choose your initial playstyle and then fully invest into that for probably around 6 months, right? So at the start of the game, you'll say, do I want to be a turn 1 player or a turn 2 player? I just explained why I think it's better to start with turn 1. And not only because it's significantly cheaper to build a turn 1 account, but because to build a turn 2 pivot is also incredibly cheap, because pretty much all you need built is Hushu, Loan, Raymary, Etheria, and Tiamat. And these are basically the only 5 characters you need built to have an incredibly strong turn 2 pivot as a turn 1 player. So that's why I'm saying to start off with cleave. Now the problem with starting your account as a cleave player is it's going to take a long time to get these speed pieces. So you're going to struggle a lot against other cleave players who outspeed you. And so that's why I'm making this video, is to help any new players or anybody who is just struggling in general against these ridiculously fast mythic cleavers, and give you some tools to combat them even if you're slower. So let's get into it. I made a couple slides to prevent me from rambling this whole time. These are the 5 methods to counter cleave. First off, synthetic speed. There are many ways in this game to regain turn 1 even if you don't go first. The strongest of which is to just go first. So Freya, if you don't know how she works, her skill 1 has this passive where your allies gain 4% turn meter whenever they're buffed, and for Freya specifically, that effect is doubled. So she'll gain 8% turn meter when she gains a buff. Bulwark gives you immunity at the start of the fight, which is a buff. With a Bulwark Freya, you gain 8% turn meter right at the start of the fight, which is roughly 28 speed, equivalent at least. You can calculate how fast your Freya will be able to cut by taking your speed and then dividing by 0.92. That will give you a pretty accurate number. You know, whatever that number spits out, you'll be able to outspeed anyone who's slower than that. And this effect can actually be enhanced by pairing her with a max skill 2 Silence. This skill gives you a shield at the start of the fight, which also counts as a buff, so you get a 16% turn meter push, which lets you outspeed just about anybody. Not just, it lets you outspeed literally anyone, right? Freya with a 16% turn meter push, like you're not getting outsped. Next up, you've got Plume. Her passive gives you 8% turn meter after every enemy turn. So if you have somebody fairly fast on Bulwark and you pair them with Plume, a lot of the times you will be able to cut. Because with Bulwark, they won't be able to do any of the typical disruption stuff, no freeze, no torpor, right? It'll have a hard time preventing Plume from pushing your, say, 330 speed Bulwark Mio to the front, and then she can go and freeze everybody and get you back that turn 1. Next up is Lighthouse and Strive. So there's a whole host of characters that you can build with Strive and or Lighthouse that help you basically come back from a lost game. Right, for instance, I've got my red Chiaki at 308 on a Strive Lighthouse specifically to cut the Freya Senyu teams that people run. All right, Freya goes first, she pushes, Senyu goes. This Chiaki tanks the Senyu S3 and then cuts to the front, heals your whole team to full, puts the Origami Guardians, and ideally, they're just not able to cleave through it because you get 35% push total from this passive and Strive, which is a lot. There are some other characters that work decently well on similar setups. For instance, Aya. You can also build Aya in a similar way with Reaper Steps and Effect Resistance. She'll gain that 30% push against anyone who picks Plume or Heinrich. Someone's trying to CC you, and you bring an Aya built like this with a couple of DPSs that you have on Bulwark. They have to strip the Bulwark to CC, which their buff strips, at least one of the debuffs should miss on the Aya, and she'll push 30% and get you back the turn 1. With this huge 40% turn meter push, the rest of your team can go. So there are a few ways to regain the turn 1 advantage, even when you've lost turn 1. Moving on to method number 2, Hoyen. Now, there are a couple different builds you can put on her, but to be a strong counter cleave unit, she needs to be on Bulwark. The only DPS shells that have Bulwark are Count and Tiger Yin. Tiger Yin is better if you're using her to cleave bruisers, right? If you have a P5 Hoyen and you use her not just as a counter cleave, but also to boost her to the front and like one-shot Rakus and stuff, I think Tiger Yin does give you more damage. But if you're using her just to counter cleave, Count is definitely the way to go. That lifesteal is huge. There are so many games I've won because Hoyen heals up basically to full off of her S3, and then they just can't kill her again, and she has 2 stacks of her passive, and her skill 1 hits like a truck. There are a few counters to Hoyen, right? Massiah S3 is the strongest counter by far, right? He just kills her and it's over, right? Because his skill 3 ignores passives. Born's S3 also ignores passives. Her whole gimmick is this passive, right? So if their ability that's able to kill her ignores the passive, she doesn't get the soul ward and not die, she just explodes. Right, so Massiah and Born can be scary. Kokardi also, because he can't be counterattacked unless he is CC'd, as long as the rest of his team is alive. And Hoyen's passive is a counterattack, basically. So she just won't attack him, and now your Hoyen only trades 1 for 1, which is not good, because the rest of your team just got nuked. Right, you need her to trade 2 for 1, right? She needs to kill whatever DPS killed her, and then something else when it gets to her turn. So those are the 3 hard counters, basically, is Massiah, Born, and Kokardi. The soft counters are any CC at all, right? If she's CC'd, her skill 2 does not proc the revenge attack, and then her turn gets skipped, and she goes 1 for 0, basically. So she needs Bulwark if you're running her as anti-cleave. Now, speed, I like 230 because it makes it fast enough that you don't get lapped, right? Another problem that you can have with Hoyen is their team goes, they one-shot you, and then they're able to lap your Hoyen, and the chip damage from their supports is able to actually kill off the teammate that you revived with your revenge attack before she's able to use the S3 again on somebody else. And then it's basically a 1v2 or a 1v3 as soon as she goes down, and your slow damage dealer gets killed off by their supports and you lose. So 230 is really nice to avoid getting lapped a ton. Now, you kind of really need 100 crit rate. Anything less than that, and you'll be very salty when you lose 2 games in a row because your 98 crit rate Hoyen missed the crit. That's why I put P4 as a good stopping point here, because the 8 extra crit rate you get for P4 is very nice at getting you to that 100%. Attack 3200 plus. It's not that important if you're running Count, right? Count gives you a lot of attack for free. And crit damage, I've found that 300 plus will one-shot most turn 1 units at 111. After all the buffs, Hoyen's skill 3 at level 1 only does a 10% lower multiplier than it did at level 4 before the buffs, right? It used to be 450 at max level. Now it's 440 at level 1. So with these stats, you should be able to, even at 111 P0, one-shot pretty much any non-bloodbath unit as long as you crit. Things to keep in mind, Kenai, this increased damage does not work on her revenge attack. Right, so when this procs, you don't get the extra damage, but on her turn, you do. I think Adept and a few others have mathed out that her highest damage build is on Fury. Right? Extra 12% damage unconditional, as long as you crit, and it works even when it's not her turn. The third method is Amber Beyontin. Now, some people think Amber Beyontin is a meme or a joke, but she's actually quite strong, especially in conjunction with Hoyen. Right? So what you would do is you pick your Beyontin and your Massiah, and even if they kill Massiah, you bring him back with the skill 2 and he nukes their team because they're not able to kill Beyontin in time. Now, the reason she's so strong with Hoyen is because you already have the Massiah, who is one of the strongest Hoyen counter. Well, not one of, he's the strongest Hoyen counter. And you have Hoyen on the same team with an Amber Beyontin that they have to deal with. The best thing that they can do is try and CC you, right? Heinrich, Mio, put the wound, right? Strip your Hoyen, right? But that's when your Strive Reaper Steps Aya comes in and steals back the turn 1, or you can bring Sylph as a really strong cleanser, right, pretty low investment, and basically get yourself back into the game. So for Beyontin, right, she needs to be on Bloodbath, otherwise she's just too squishy in the iced state, right? The rest of your team is dead, they can just focus on her, and they'll be able to kill her. And then Strive is also really nice, because once again, when she's in the ice state, every time they hit her, she boosts 10%. You can also run her on Bulwark. Amber doesn't have Bulwark, so you need to use 3 Bloodbath modules and 3 Bulwark modules, but it's not a bad option either if they just bring, say, a Mio to try and counter and freeze your team and put the wound. Yeah, it's not going to work because your Beyontin has Bulwark. So if you're using this build, right, you want 250 plus speed, which is not the easiest to get, but if you level her skill 1, I think if my skill 1 was leveled, I'd be at like 280 right now. So 250 plus is, I think, not too unreasonable. 20,000 health so that she doesn't just explode, right? With Bloodbath, 20,000 health is reasonably high. 2,000 plus defense, once again, so that she doesn't just explode. It's a lot better if she's able to just take her turn and hit the skill 2 rather than needing to go through the Amber and then hit the skill 2, because everyone on the enemy team's cooldowns will still be gone. So if your Massiah comes back and he's not able to actually finish everyone off, you've got a couple more turns where your Beyontin can get stuff done and they have no cooldowns. And then if you can afford it, 200 plus effect resistance so that she can shrug off those debuffs and be very difficult to counter. Now, on a build like this, 111 is actually fine, right? If you're only using her to revive your AoE, DPS, and counter cleave, one-shot the enemy team, she doesn't need the skill cooldown reduction on her skill 2. Now, if you want to use her a bit more flexibly, right, if you want to double pump or anything like that, you're going to want at least 141. And then if you're slow, 441 is good. I actually have my Beyontin built like this. I took some of her faster gear for somebody else recently, but I had her on a build that was around 265, right? You know, mostly blue speed. And then we got one actually good piece and then one decent piece. So I feel like a build like this should be rather achievable fairly early into the game, especially if you actually care to roll good shell passives, which I don't because this build is sufficient. I'll edit in some games later to show off the power of Amber Beyontin. Next up we have something I debated including in the first place, but I think I would rather make this guide a bit more future-proof, because surely one of the next couple LDs is going to be a very strong AoE damage dealer, right? Like, we are long overdue a dark Massiah, basically. So when that happens, and you have basically 2 Massiahs, you can use one as your tank buster, and you can build the other like this. Now, these stat requirements are basically the minimum. This is about the damage I was able to deal to a defense buffed Rosa with these stats, right? And then this was the final damage passive, right? So if your Massiah is lacking a bit in stats, you can put in the extra chips to actually re-roll this to like a max roll constant damage bonus and get a little bit more out of that. And it was still barely enough. Now he is unbuffed. They do have a defense buff, and This is the Rosa in question, so almost 23,000 health, a little bit of defense, not particularly tanky, but Rosa is, I believe, on the tankier side for damage dealers. I believe Yelly and Senyu are a lot squishier, so he should be able to counter cleave. With the Law of Silence and Bloodbath, you will be able to tank a Senyu S3. The only reason in this game I had to bring him back with Beyontin is because I hit the Viper S3 like a bot and triggered this, which was enough damage to kill. So normally with a draft like this, instead of Viper, you would bring your red Chiaki, and you would heal between their damage dealers so that he doesn't die, and then he can get his turn and counter cleave. The Plume S1 because I didn't want to strip the buffs. I wanted to test it with full buffs, and you tanked that fine, right? Viper helps with the damage reduction. If Viper wasn't here and it was red Chiaki instead, my Massiah would be probably around here, but then Chiaki would boost to the front and then full heal and give an even bigger damage reduction than Viper does, right? Origami Guardians is, I think, 35% damage reduction and not 30. You would likely be able to tank any lower damage setup, right? You would pick this against, like, for instance, if they take Freya Turandot on 1 and 2, and then you lose any chance of speed contesting, they can only pick 3 damage dealers, right? So if you ban one of them, you only have 2 to worry about, and you can tank through that. My Beyontin was actually ahead, but I hit the S3 like a doofus, so she pushed and killed me. Alright, but that's why the Strive is so good, because we got hit twice, we boosted 20%, which at 250 speed, a 20% push is like 320-ish? 315? Yeah, about 315. So you can outspeed quite a bit of stuff with your Beyontin, and then you would just bring your Massiah to the front and chop them when they have no buffs. Because as you see later, right, the Freya laps, gets a turn, and then they all have a defense buff when I hit them. Without the defense buff, I'm pretty sure both of these die. Right, he's not going to cleave anything with Bloodbath, so don't even bother. But yeah, against like a full turn 1 cleave team, this should work. But you need really the most speed you can get without losing any of these damage stats. The crit rate is a bit negotiable. I would say 100% obviously is best, but what really is 5%, right? If you can sacrifice 5% crit rate for like, 12 speed or something, sure, you'll lose a few games because you missed a crit, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal. The crit damage and attack, though, on this build, I think is non-negotiable. It's got to be at least this high. My Massiah is P4, so 10% extra base stats, and then a little bit of crit rate and crit damage. But some of these modules are quite good. Right, this one is really good. Yeah, this one is really good. But they're not the best modules. If you farm better gear than this, you can definitely get these stats even at P0. But yeah, this build it's a bit more of a meme, but it's a lot stronger than the Amber Massiah build some people try to run. That build does not work at all. he does no damage. Now, you do need Bloodbath. Law of Silence, Void State on its own is not enough, and you can't play him against any buff strips, right? If they have a Plume, you have to ban it. If they have a Heinrich, you have to ban it, because he needs the Void State or he's not tanking anything, right? Just Bloodbath is not enough. If/when we ever get the second super strong, Massiah tier AoE DPS, this is a build to keep in your back pocket. Now, last but certainly not least, you build your tanks. You just tank down. You are going to want these characters built anyway, right? Raymary and Loan are very strong in turn 1, so it's not like you're, diverting your resources or spreading your account too thin or anything. You want to build them anyway. Tiamat, if you're eventually going to be a standard player, you want your Tiamat built also. So she's not necessarily going to be useful at all to cleave turn 2 players, whereas these two will be. Raymary and Loan are incredibly good for cleaving. This is the build I've got on my Raymary. She's a little bit slow. I'd like her probably 250, so that she can reliably outspeed stuff with the Turandot S3. But it is what it is. Loan, right? You build her fast, right? 8 Swift Rush. She needs Bloodbath. If you don't have Bloodbath, she's way too squishy. And then Swift Smite for the speed. You can sacrifice crit rate for speed, in my opinion. Right? She doesn't need to crit every hit. She just needs to be fast. And then Tiamat is a work in progress. I don't have the Bramble Shell for her yet. I don't have her skill 1 leveled yet. But even at 115 with this scuffed build, she's been putting in work. And of course, Fia, you definitely want her for turn 1 as well. Get her as much health as you can. I would try and go for Synergy here if you're cleaving, because this extra damage bonus is quite nice. But Insight works, so that you can push back the enemy. Insight is fine. Dauntless is good. Damage reduction is fine. But yeah, you just bring your bruisers. You bring them on Amber. You have some way to heal them up. There are very strong SR options, right? You've got your Red Chiaki. You've got Sylph. You don't need to necessarily invest all that much in your turn 2 if you're just building SR healers, right? And once again, these two are very strong in cleave anyway, so you want to build them regardless. And so you would pick these in any draft where they're just trying to cleave you. But basically, if you see Freya, you pick your Ambers, right? If they have Freya, right? Freya is so weak against turn 2, right? I would say 60, maybe 65% of Freya's power budget is the fact that she outspeeds everyone, right? 60+% of Freya's strength is that you can just pick her on 3 and you know you have first turn. When someone is not fighting you for turn 1, that's 65+% of Freya's power gone, right? Against bruiser teams, she is so bad, right? She does very little for your team. So when you see someone pick a Freya, you can say, okay, I'm not banning that. I'm going to just let you have a terrible pick into my draft, right? And you bring your slow Amber bruisers, you ban their Heinrich or their Mio or whatever. You bring a cleanser and you just win. So that is what I would like to call the 5 methods to counter cleave. All right, you're not countering cleave, you're counter cleaving. Right? You're cleaving cleave players, even when they steal away turn 1. Yeah, I think I'll put in some example games here and then closing thoughts at the end. You can see here he picked the Freya and the turn dot early, right? So this was a very easy, just kind of tank down kind of draft. Send you on 3, easy Hoyen. And we picked our Loan last. This is before I got her on Amber. So unfortunately he did land on the Hoyen, so she does nothing here. But now you'll see the weakness of Freya. Right, it's because as soon as Fushu gets that skill 3 off, the game's over. Right, and this is a 1/1/1 Fushu, by the way. Right, I have no lattices in her yet. And here we got Freya on lock. So what do? We tank down. And this one was a bit of a longer one, so I'm not even gonna play it here. But I mean, you get the idea, right? If they pick Freya, you just go with your Ambers and ban whatever their strongest unit is that counters your draft, and you pretty much just win. Once again, we see Freya, we tank down, and she is just really bad into the tank down draft. Unless your first 2, let's say if you pick Freya on 3 and your first 2 picks were like, Plume Senyu, then it's not so bad because Freya can give your whole team a boost and you can pick some really devastating anti-turn 2 stuff here, right? Like Heinrich Nahor. And, that's pretty strong. But when people are just trying to fight you for turn 1, because they know you're a cleave player, you just pick a couple of Ambers with a 1/1/1 Fushu and then like any anti-cleave SR you have built. And it's really hard to deal with. I think you get the point, right? I think the point is pretty gotten here. These two, right, if you're going second and these two are both available, you just pick them because you can slap turn dot on 3 and pivot cleave, or you can pivot CC or just anything. And then if they bring the Freya, you just tank down, right? Simple as that. And so, depending on your rank, slow will mean different speeds, right? So, if you're platinum or below, even like 310 speed is pretty fast, right? You should be able to outspeed people down here. In diamond, I think it's like 320. Master, if you want to consistently outspeed turn 1 players in master, you probably need to be around 340. And then low mythic, you're getting into the high 340s. And then, Mythic 2 and Mythic 3. If you want to consistently outspeed most people, you need like 360 speed. But that's just for turn 1 players. Against turn 2 players, you're probably safe to subtract like 15 to 20 speed from all those numbers I gave you, right? Most turn 2 players, even in the higher rank ranges, typically aren't that fast, right? They'll have maybe one character with all their speed gear, and then a Bulwark Freya that's fast. And if you just pre-ban or counterpick those, a lot of people, they'll have their Mio at like 337 or something, right? So as long as you have a decently fast turn meter pusher, you should be able to cleave turn 2 players just fine. And then ideally, with all the stuff you learned in this video, you'll be able to also fight against the much faster turn 1 players that are high 340, even high 350 speeds. And just don't be a fool like me and try and speed contest the fastest players in the game, and you should be fine. You should be a-okay. So that's about it for this one. I will be working on the next part in the series. Hopefully I'll have that out soon, before the end of the season. At the very least, I want to have this all done to hopefully help you guys climb as high as possible before the season ends. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.